All right. We are broadcasting. So good afternoon, everyone. And I see participants are joining. Let me give people a chance to pile in. I see the numbers going up as we talk, so I'm going to give it another minute and then I'm going to kick things off here. All right. Fantastic. Love to see these numbers going up. All right. So good afternoon and welcome to our College Savings webinar. September is College Savings Month, so we're excited to be doing our part to help families start saving and meet their goals. Today's webinar features Mark Kantrowitz, publisher and VP of Research for SavingForCollege.com, walking you through the basics of how to save for college and how to get the most out of a 529 plan. I'm Martha Kordiak-Mert, COO of SavingForCollege.com, and I'll be serving as the moderator today. Now, we collected questions during the registration process. We'll try to address some of those as we go along. You can also type your questions into the Q&A section of the screen. We'll save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer as many of the questions as possible. And we do get a lot of questions in these webinars, so we're typically not able to get to all of them. So if we don't get to yours, please visit our forum at forum.savingforcollege.com. You can try asking your question there. We'll be on the lookout for it. Today's webinar is brought to you by College Choice CD 529 Savings Plan. College Choice CD 529 Savings Plan provides multiple FDIC insured CD investment options and a high yield savings account without charging any fees. Learn more at www.collegechoicecd.com. And I'm excited to announce that we also have with us today Marissa Rowe. Marissa is Executive Director of the Indiana Education Savings Authority, and she oversees all of the 529 plans offered by the state of Indiana, including College Choice CD. I'll be asking her a few questions to get us started. Welcome, Marissa.
Hi, thanks for having me, and happy National College Savings Month.
Happy College Savings Month to you. We're so excited to have you. And tell me, is the state of Indiana doing anything special to celebrate this month?
We actually have a proclamation from the governor, Eric Holcomb, stating that this is College Savings Month for the state of Indiana as well as nationally. And then Indiana's proud to have our Save to Win sweepstakes. So what we're doing for the month of September is anyone who makes a contribution to their College Choice 529 plan within the month of September. So whether you already contribute from payroll deduction, you're a brand new account owner, anybody who contributes is going to be entered to win a $5,000 account deposit that we'll draw for at the end of the month. So you just have to contribute to your account sometime between the 1st and 30th.
That's fantastic. Are there any restrictions on who's eligible for that?
For this particular contest, you do need to be an Indiana resident, but definitely check your home state. Lots of states are offering some great opportunities in September.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we also have an article up on savingforcollege.com that describes some of the different promotions going on out there. So in addition, though, I do want to let our audience know that the Indiana Education Savings Authority is generously offering registrants to today's webinar the chance to win $500 toward a College Choice CD 529 plan. So the winner will be chosen at random by savingforcollege.com, and we're going to announce the winner at the end of today's webinar. So stick around for that. All right, so now Marissa, before we get into the presentation, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, and we do want to acknowledge that 2020 has been a really challenging year for people. I don't even have to go into all of it. We all know, right? The global pandemic, the resulting economic crisis, work from home, learn from home. It's just created a lot of challenges for families. But we've also seen interest in saving for college remain strong. So I thought, let's start with a poll question for our audience. We'll see how people respond to this, and then I'll have a couple of follow-up questions for you, Marissa. So the question is, have you put off saving for college or opening a 529 plan because of the current economic situation? So I'm just going to launch that poll, and you should be seeing that on your screen. Please go ahead and answer that. We'll give you a few moments to tally up, and then we'll display the answers. All right. Fantastic, seeing lots of responses coming in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this. Thanks to everyone, and share the results. So, Marissa, this is really positive. We're seeing that 82% of people say it has not affected their plans. Now, there are still 18% of people who are saying it has affected their plans, but yeah, this is kind of consistent with what we've heard at Saving for College. So, how does this compare what you're hearing from investors at your 529 plans in Indiana?
Well, Martha, what we find overwhelmingly is that savers save. So we're seeing the same behaviors we did back in 2008 with the housing downturn. Most education savers are staying the course. In fact, College Choice City saw a spike in contribution activity in March, which is unusual as we usually only see that during the holiday season and gifting season. So to see that spike in contributions was really out of the norm for us. What that indicates to me is an interest in a 529 vehicle that doesn't lose value no matter what happens in the markets.
Well, that is good news. Now, of course, like I said, we did see 18% of the people saying, yeah, I have put off saving. So I wonder if you could share some advice with our audience today, especially those who might feel hesitant to open a 529 plan at this time of economic uncertainty.
Right. I think my encouragement to you is going to be this. Every dollar saved is one less you're going to have to borrow and repay with interest later. So just do the best you can. As we like to say, don't wish, plan when it comes to education savings.
That's great advice. That's really great advice. All right. Thank you, Marissa. We appreciate your support for helping to make this webinar possible. So Marissa will pop back in later to talk a little bit more about FDIC insured plans and also to help answer questions at the end. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Kantrowitz to begin our presentation. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Martha. So we're talking about how to save for college, and let's begin by comparing the various options that are available for saving for college. This table shows you some of the more popular options: 529 plans, Coverdell education savings accounts, Roth IRAs, and custodial bank and brokerage accounts, otherwise known as UTMA and UGMA accounts. Each of these different types of college savings accounts provides different tax and financial aid advantages. Now, in the income restrictions column, that is contribution limits, not distribution limits. The Coverdell education savings accounts and Roth IRAs have income restrictions on contributions, while 529 plans and UGMA accounts do not. The income phase outs on the Coverdell education savings account do not change each year, whereas the Roth IRA limits are updated, adjusted for inflation every year, and we have updated them for 2020. Aside from gift tax exclusions, 529 plans and UGMA or UTMA accounts do not have contribution limits, do not have annual contribution limits, while the Coverdell education savings accounts are limited to $2,000 per year, and Roth IRAs are limited to $6,000 per year, $7,000 if you're age 50 or older. The tax benefits for 529 plans are limited. You have to do a qualified distribution, which is used to pay for qualified higher education expenses, often known by its acronym QHEE, which is pronounced KEY. A Roth IRA always allows a tax-free return of contributions, but the financial aid differences are significant. A custodial 529 plan account is reported as a parent asset on the dependent student's FAFSA, reducing the impact on aid eligibility compared to if it were reported as a student asset. Parent assets and the custodial 529 plan accounts are assessed on a bracketed scale with a top bracket of 5.64%. It's much higher for UGMA and UTMA accounts. Now, a Roth IRA is not reported as an asset on the FAFSA, but any distributions are reported as income on a subsequent year's FAFSA. Even a tax-free return of contributions will be counted as untaxed income on the FAFSA, which has the same impact as adjusted gross income or taxable income. And this can reduce aid eligibility by as much as half of that distribution amount. UGMA and UTMA accounts are reported as a student asset, which reduces aid eligibility by 20% of the asset value on the FAFSA and 25% on the CSS profile form. Thus, $10,000 in a 529 plan can reduce aid eligibility by up to $564, compared with $5,000 in a Roth IRA and $2,000 in an UGMA or UTMA account. Now, the definition of qualified expenses changes depending on which type of college savings vehicle you're using. And it differs according to both college, higher education expenses and K-12 expenses. A 529 plan has it's focused mostly on college savings, and the only K-12 benefit that it has, which was provided recently, is up to $10,000 a year in K-12 tuition, whereas a Coverdell Education Savings Account has a much broader set of qualified expenses for K-12, not just for college, but the contributions are more limited than a 529 plan. Whereas a Roth IRA, you can use a tax-free return of contribution for pretty much any purpose. Same thing with an UGMA or UTMA account. Now, the earnings portion of a non-qualified distribution from a 529 plan is going to be subject to ordinary income taxes and a 10% tax penalty, plus possible recapture of state income tax breaks that are attributable to the distribution. So now let's turn to some of the basics of 529 plans. And what is a 529 plan? They offer the best mix of tax and financial aid advantages for families who are saving for college. Most are state-based, and all but one state offers at least one 529 plan. The benefits of a 529 plan include earnings accumulate on a tax-deferred basis and are entirely tax-free when used to pay for qualified higher education expenses. 529 plans provide some estate planning benefits, such as superfunding. More than 2/3 of the states offer a state income tax deduction or tax credit on contributions to the state's 529 plan. In 7 states, the state income tax break is for contributions to any state's 529 plan. 529 plans have no income or age restrictions on contributions or distributions, unlike other college savings accounts. If a 529 plan account is owned by the student, as we mentioned previously, or a dependent student's parent, the impact on financial aid eligibility is minimal. 529 plans have no annual contribution limits other than that annual gift tax exclusion. 529 plans have high contribution limits, aggregate contribution limits, that range from $235,000 to $529,000, depending on the state. So the key with 529 plans is to save early and often. This chart demonstrates that your greatest asset is time. The sooner you start saving, the more time there'll be for your earnings to compound. If you start saving at birth, about 1/3 of your college savings goal will come from the earnings. If you wait until the child enters high school to start saving, less than 10% of the goal will come from the earnings, and you'll have to save 6 times as much per month to reach the same college savings goal. So now let's talk about choosing a 529 plan. I'll break it down into several steps. First step is to choose the type of 529 plan that you want to use. There are 2 main types of 529 plans, a prepaid tuition plan and a college savings plan. The difference is like the difference between a defined benefit plan, like a pension plan, and a defined contribution plan, like a 401k. Prepaid tuition plans let you buy a year's worth of tuition and have it always worth a year of tuition. This provides some parents with peace of mind, knowing that they have it covered. But you have to pay a premium on top of a year's tuition, and some of the prepaid tuition plans suffer from actuarial shortfalls, causing a little bit of worry. There are only a handful of state prepaid tuition plans left. In addition to prepaid tuition plans offered by the states, there's also a prepaid tuition plan offered by private colleges, the Private College 529 plan. 529 college savings plans are much more popular. Investments in a 529 plan can lose money, but investors also benefit from the investment returns. You can manage the risk by controlling the asset allocation. How much of that investment is in stocks versus how much is in lower risk investments. All 529 college savings plans offer at least one age-based asset allocation that starts off with an aggressive mix of investments when the child is young and gradually shifts us to a lower percentage invested in stocks as college approaches. So that reduces the risk of losing money. And with the FDIC insured portfolios, many investors will use those as the low risk option, especially as college approaches. Direct sold 529 plans are offered directly by the states, while advisor sold 529 plans are sold by financial advisors. And there are some important differences among them. Now let's turn to step 2. When you're choosing a 529 plan, one of the key considerations is the taxes. What are these incentives? And you'll notice in this chart that there is only one state in really dark blue, and that's Indiana. And they have the best mix, the best state income tax rate based on our independent analysis. So when you choose a 529 plan, you need to consider both the state income tax incentives and the fees. Sometimes there's a trade-off between lower fees in an out-of-state plan and state income tax breaks on an in-state plan. So you need to have to balance those and decide which is the best mix for you. Now let's turn to step 3. You need to do your research. You know, you're planning for your child's future, spend more than just a minute or two doing the research. We have many tools on savingforcollege.com for researching 529 plans, including comparison tools and plan details that let you dig into the details of the state tax breaks and the fees and other aspects of the 529 plans. You should also research the plan manager's track record and the risk that the plan may change managers. And if it's up for renewal, their contract, you could have the plan manager change. And every year, one or two plan managers do change. So if they have 10 years left on their contract, then you know there's going to be a lot of stability. You should definitely consider differences in the fees. Minimizing costs are the key to maximizing net returns. Note that the fees that I'm showing on this slide are for direct sold 529 plans. The fees for advisor sold 529 plans can be higher than the fees for direct sold 529 plans. Some of the advisor sold 529 plans also charge commissions. When we assign our 5-cap ratings to 529 plans, which we do once a quarter, we consider all of these factors among many others. Now, step 4 is to choose the specific investment options in the 529 plan. And most 529 plans have a few dozen portfolios that you can spread your money among. So you need to first identify your risk tolerance. I mean, the stock market is a roller coaster, and some people just don't like the stress that comes from watching your investments not just go up, but go down and then come up. This past year has been extremely chaotic and more volatile than your typical year. It gets enough to give you heartburn. So you need to identify your risk tolerance and how much exposure should you have to the stock market. Now, more than 2/3 of the families choose an age-based investment glide path where, as I said before, it starts off aggressive, maybe 80 to 100% in stocks, and it bottoms out when the child's about to go to college in typically around 10% stocks, maybe as high as 20% stocks. And the rest is in safer investments where there is little or no risk of loss of principal. Now, there are two main types of 529 portfolios that we show here. There are the static portfolios and the dynamic portfolios. The static 529 plans have a specific percentage of equities and a specific investment strategy. Age-based or enrollment date 529 plans change the asset allocation periodically, maybe every year, every few years, maybe every month. And what they're trying to do is manage the risk from the stock market volatility so that as college approaches, you lock in your gains as opposed to having them at risk. Now, many 529 plans also offer a choice of portfolios with active management and portfolios with passive management, such as index funds. And that's another decision you'll have to make, which of those you prefer. Now it's time for our next poll question.
All right, thanks, Mark. So let me pop that up. All right, so our next poll question is related to FDIC insured 529 plans. So the question is, did you know that there were FDIC insured 529 plans before today? We've mentioned it a few times, so everyone should be aware now, but we're launching this and just curious about how many people were aware that this was an option. All right, people are jumping in here, and give it another moment. All right, looks like most people have answered. So let me share the results here. So Marissa, actually we're seeing most people were not aware. Probably not surprisingly, right? Because there aren't as many, and it's not, typically what people talk about. But yeah, almost 70% said, no, I had no idea. So Marissa, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell the audience a little bit more about FDIC insured options for college savings.
Perfect, thanks. And I thought the results, that's very interesting, but we also have to remember that this is really, for a lot of folks, this may be the very first time they've been exposed to 529. So I love that we're in this space where we're talking broad topics. You're gonna hear about things nationally, and then you're gonna go back and kind of look at your situation and where you're going. So if there are things in terms that you're not used to, hang in there, you're learning, and this is gonna be great for everybody. So talking about FDIC insured, so let's talk about that for a second. These are a low risk alternative to college savings, or for college savings. Your options are going to include both fixed rate CDs as well as a high yield savings account that are offered by more than 20 plans. What sets these options apart are that they are insured by the federal government. So typically up to about $250,000 per account, hence their name. So these are your FDIC insured options. The great part is that these are more conservative options, but they do offer the same tax benefits and minimal impact on financial aid as other 529s. So this is just, again, one more option you have in the wide variety of things that you can invest in. So who might be the audience for these? Who would want an FDIC insured option? You have everyone from short-term savers. So folks who are using the funds the next couple of years and don't have time to recover from a potential market downturn. As Mark indicated earlier, it's been a bit of a crazy year. Folks, anything from heartburn to, just don't want to touch it, right? So you're afraid to even get into the markets. So you have to think about that. So if you're personally thinking about going back to school, maybe you want to finish your credential, maybe it's time for that master's, that PhD, then you can use these options even for yourself, not just for the kiddos. If you're a parent of a high school senior or a high school student, you've got that really short time horizon. Those are another great audience for this product. Next, you're going to look at conservative savers and grandparents. These are people who want to know exactly what they're getting up front, and they won't tolerate a cent less for their initial investment. So grandma, she wants to be able to count on a certain number of dollars being there when it's time for junior to go to school. But then you're also going to find savvy investors who just want to diversify their portfolios. There's something about, Mark said 2/3 are in year of enrollment portfolios. In Indiana, it's around 70% choose the save it and leave it option. But we're finding a lot of folks want to have something with a guaranteed return that they don't have to worry about. So those are going to be some of your savvy investors. So at the end of the day, it comes down to finding the product that works best for you, your philosophy, and your time frame. There are lots of attractive options out there, and you really always want to make sure you check your home state's plan first for tax incentives specific to your state.
Thanks, Marissa. One question that came up, and I think you kind of touched on this when you talked about the mix of investments that people have, but someone asked, well, does low risk equal low return?
That's a great question. Does low risk equal low return? I think it depends. I think like Mark mentioned earlier, so the return on the investment's part of it. Fees are part of it. FDIC insured, specifically, in Indiana, ours are fee free. So you're not paying any fees. So every dollar in is every dollar that's going to be gaining the interest on that. In other plans, you're gonna be paying fees. So you're gonna look at that. So definitely just do your research. I don't think that's necessarily always the case, but you're not in the stock market. So that's your stocks are really where you have the best chance for the greatest return. but that's also the greatest risk. So it comes down to what are you comfortable with? And for some people, they have no problem with risk. Other people, they'd rather put it in something that's FDIC insured.
Yeah, perfect. Someone also asked, do you have to be an Indiana resident to use College Choice CD?
No, what's beautiful is all 529 plans are open to every resident of every state, which for some of you that this is your first inkling into 529 are like, whoa, that's way too many choices. The idea is that's when you start looking what your state offers. So back to that map, which is you can find at savingforcollege.com. The different colors shows what your states offer. So some offer parity, doesn't matter which state you invest in. Some don't offer any tax incentive aside from what are already built into these. And remember, no matter where you live, you get tax deferred growth and tax-free withdrawals in these accounts. So they're a great option whether your state offers an additional incentive or not.
All right, fantastic. And I'll just mention a couple people asked about rates. So I'll just tell them, you know, the rates, especially on the savings account, will change probably from day to day. CD rates are fixed for some time, but if you want to check out, for example, collegechoicecd.com, you can see what their current rates are. And on savingforcollege.com, you can find more information about other FDIC insured plans and their websites.
Exactly, and always make sure you read the disclosure booklet before you invest.
All right. Okay, thanks, Marissa. So with that, Mark, let me turn it back over to you, I think. Okay. Do we have another question?
Well, let's turn to 529 plans and financial aid and try to keep as much time as possible for the Q&A at the end of the talk.
All right.
The FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, bases the expected family contribution, or EFC, on the sum of a parent contribution and a student contribution. Each of these is based on contributions from income and contributions from assets. Income includes adjusted gross income as well as untaxed income. An example of untaxed income is a tax-free return distribution from a Roth IRA. Student assets are assessed more heavily than parent assets. Student assets will include UGMA and UTMA accounts, mutual funds, and other savings accounts, but not custodial 529 plan accounts. Those are treated as though they were a parent asset. Now, the parent contribution is divided by the number of children in college. So increasing the number of children in college from 1 to 2 is almost like dividing the parent income in half. So let's continue with 529 plans in the FAFSA. 529 plans receive favorable treatment on the FAFSA. First of all, the first $10,000 or so will fall under what's called an asset protection allowance and will not be counted. The exact amount depends on the age of the older parent. Any amount above the asset protection allowance is counted up to a maximum of 5.64% of the 529 account value. Other student assets, such as the UGMA or UTMA accounts, are counted at 20%. So counting it as a parent asset is much more favorable than counting it as a student asset. Now, qualified distributions aren't reported on the FAFSA, while non-qualified distributions are included in the adjusted gross income. So there's this difference between whether a qualified, whether the 529 plan account is counted as an asset and then distributions are ignored, or in certain cases, it will be counted, not counted as an asset, but distributions will count. And one of those is a grandparent-owned 529 plan. There's nothing to report as an asset on the FAFSA because the grandparent, as the account owner, is neither the parent nor the student. However, any distributions, any withdrawals from this 529 plan account will count as student income on a subsequent year's FAFSA and will be counted at up to 50% of the distribution amount. There are several workarounds. I mean, grandparents can avoid this by waiting until after January 1st of the student's sophomore year in college. This assumes that the student's going to graduate in 4 years or less to take a distribution to help pay for the college. And that's because the FAFSA uses prior year income, which is 2-year-old income information. So you run that in reverse and you know when you can take a distribution, and even though it's income, if you're graduating 4 years, it won't appear on a subsequent year's FAFSA. On the other hand, if you graduate in 5 years, it will occur on your 5th year's FAFSA. Or you could always give the money to the parents to contribute to a parent-owned 529 plan account. And there are some other workarounds, like rolling over money from a grandparent-owned 529 plan to a parent-owned 529 plan, which can work, assuming that the two plans, the 529 plans, are in the same state, because many states treat an outbound rollover as though it's a non-qualified distribution. So let's talk about the distributions, the 529 plan withdrawals. And how much should you withdraw? Well, the first and most important thing is that these distributions must match up with the qualified expenses that are paid during the same tax year. So you don't want to take a distribution in December to pay spring tuition in January, but you could take a distribution in December to pay your spring tuition if you're paying it in December. So it's best to take distributions after you paid for the qualified higher education expenses so that you don't accidentally withdraw too much money, because then you'll have to scramble. And generally you can't put the money back in. There is, however, one main exception, which is if the college refunded some of the amounts that you paid for with 529 plan expenses, you can recontribute that refund within 60 days of receiving the refund to a 529 plan in the beneficiary, in the student's name. It doesn't have to be the same 529 plan, it just has to be a 529 plan, which names the student as a beneficiary. Now, you can take a distribution up to the amount of a tax-free scholarship without having to pay a penalty, but the earnings portion of that distribution is going to be taxed as ordinary income at the recipient's rate, which is usually the student's. Similarly, for the American Opportunity Tax Credit, you can subtract up to $4,000 of tuition and textbook expenses that you're exempt from that 10% tax penalty. You can't double dip. You can't use the same qualified higher education expenses to justify both the American Opportunity Tax Credit and a tax redistribution from a 529 plan, but at least you avoid the 10% tax penalty if your qualified expenses were reduced and you don't have enough to justify the full amount of that distribution. And for the lifetime learning tax credit, instead of $4,000, it's up to $10,000. Okay, now let's turn to how you go about making that distribution. We recommend making the distribution payable to the beneficiary. If there are any non-qualified distributions, they will be taxed at the beneficiary's lower tax rate if the beneficiary is the one who receives that distribution, or if it's a direct distribution to the college. But you probably should keep it away from the college because sometimes things can be misinterpreted and you don't want any complications with the bursar's office or the financial aid office. If you make that distribution directly to the college, some college financial aid offices may reduce the amount of the student's need-based financial aid because they'll categorize it as a resource or cash support, which reduce aid eligibility by 100% and 50% of the amount that was received. So it's something that you have to be careful about. If you make the distribution to the parent, if there's any non-qualified distribution in the mix, then those distributions will be taxed at the parent's rate, not the child's rate. So let's thank you, and let's open it up for Q&A, and Martha is also going to announce the winner's name of that giveaway.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Mark. We got a lot of questions that came in. So let's just jump into some of those, and then we'll come back and answer, we'll come back and announce the winner. But I do want to mention, I've gotten several questions, and I forgot to mention at the beginning, people have been asking if we'll be sending out a link to the recording and the slides. So yes, you will be getting a follow-up email, and you'll be able to access the recording to this as well as the slides. So Mark, a bunch of questions came in while you were going through that last section. So I thought, let's start with that, and then we'll kind of go back to some of the 529 basics. So can you remind everyone again, what does FAFSA stand for and what does EFC stand for?
Okay. So FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It is an application form that is used to award federal aid, state aid, and institutional aid at most colleges and universities. There's a supplemental form called the CSS profile form that is used by about 200 mostly private colleges for awarding their own financial aid funds. They still use the FAFSA for federal and state aid. The EFC, expected family contribution, is a measure of the family's financial strength. It factors into certain need-based aid, where financial need is the difference between total college costs, including tuition fees, room and board, book supplies and equipment, and so on, and the EFC. So a higher EFC means lower financial need, and a lower EFC means higher financial need. Also, for a single EFC, a higher cost college is going to yield more financial need and therefore more financial aid.
All right, great. One other related question Brian asked, when there are multiple siblings in college, does that affect the EFC?
Yes. So when you have as I said earlier, the parent contribution portion of the expected family contribution is divided by the number of children in college at the same time. So when you're going from one child in college to two children in college, it's like dividing that parent's income in half. It qualifies them for much more financial aid. They still have this student contribution, which may differ among each child, but generally speaking, since the FAFSA is focused on cash flow, you're going to have more financial aid per student when you have two children in college at the same time than when you have only one child in college. So if you're planning on having multiple children, it's better to have twins than singletons who are separated in age by 4 years. My older brother has twins, actually two sets of twins. My younger brother has children who are not overlapping in college much at all.
All right, so that's one of the bonuses when you hear you're having more than one at a time. All right, let's get back to some of the, there were some of the basic questions that came in, so let's address some of those. First, I got several variations of this question. There was something from Sarah, there was something from Chai. It's about who can set up a 529 plan for whom, and like whose name should a 529 plan be in, and who should be the owner of 529 plan. So, you know, someone was asking, like, can I open one for my niece or nephew? And then you sort of talked about some of the financial aid implications. So you can sort of address who can open one for whom and what's the recommendation.
Okay, so a 529 plan has two people associated with it. The account owner, and there's only one account owner, so you can't have a jointly owned 529 plan, and the beneficiary, the student. And generally speaking, it is best to contribute to a parent-owned 529 plan because that minimizes the financial aid impact, or a custodial 529 plan, which is reported on the FAFSA as though it were owned by the parent, as though it was a parent asset. Now, you can contribute, a grandparent or aunt or uncle can contribute to a parent-owned 529 plan. There's no requirement that you be the account owner, though in about 10 of the states, in order to claim that state income tax break, you have to be the account owner. But in the rest of the states, you don't. There are other reasons why people might want to be the account owner, like maybe the parents are spendthrift and the grandparent doesn't trust them to not mismanage the money. So sometimes the grandparents will be the account owner to retain control. There is another option, which is to open a custodial 529 plan account with the grandparent as the custodian. That way you control the account until the grandchild reaches the age of majority, which can be age 18, 19, or 21, depending on the state. In fact, you can even keep it secret from the family because there's no annual tax reporting. So you can wait until the child reaches the age of majority and say, surprise, we saved all this money for your college education, and that can influence where the child goes to school. It certainly will reduce their debt. And 529 plans are a great way of leaving a legacy for your grandchildren or even future descendants.
Okay. Mark, one more question for you. And this Kate asked, and I think we got a couple other variations on this, which is, should I create one 529 plan for all my kids, or should I have separate 529 plans, one for each child?
I recommend that you have separate 529 plans, one per child, for a few reasons. One, if you're in an age-based asset allocation, the time horizon for each child will be different, and therefore the investment mix should be different. So you can do that by having a separate 529 plan per child. Also, if you're saving for K-12 tuition, that's another reason, because you're going to be paying those elementary and secondary school tuition at different times earlier than for college. So I even recommend that if you're saving for both college and elementary or secondary school, that you have separate 529 plans for each. Another reason is that the state income tax breaks can be limited either per taxpayer or per beneficiary. Some states do one, some states do the other. If you're in a state where it's per beneficiary, having separate 529 plans means that you can have more of a state income tax break based on your contributions than if it's all in just one 529 plan. Also, there are aggregate limits ranging from 235,000 to 529,000, depending on the state. And if you're at the low end, you might bump up against that limit if you have just one 529 plan for all of your children if you have a large family. Whereas if you have a separate 529 plan for each, it's not going to run up against that. And it's also easier to keep track of everything, so you know which child, grandchild you gave money to. And it also avoids some jealousy. Like since there's only one beneficiary of a 529 plan, it's probably going to be the eldest, and the younger children are going to worry, are you not saving in our names because you don't think we're going to go to college?
And actually, Marissa, on that note, let me turn something to you. I know I saw a question about being able to, can you switch beneficiaries easily on a 529 plan?
You absolutely can. So the wonderful thing, and this is where we get a lot of questions, is what happens if my child either doesn't go to school, because let's be clear, when we're talking about college, we're talking about anything post-secondary. So and depending on the state, there's going to be some different rules. So just make sure you check your home state. That includes tech, vocational, 2-year, 4-year, public, private. Doesn't have to be towards a degree. It can just be, classes, and even some registered apprenticeships. So there's lots and lots of flexibility there. But a lot of folks are worried, like if my kid does get the full ride for soccer or becomes a YouTube star, now I'm stuck with all these thousands of dollars that I can't get back. And it's very easy, actually. You can change a beneficiary. Mark, I think it's once per year, and you're able to change it to a sibling. You can actually go, so the, again, federal government, and who defines member of the family, so you'll want to look up that term. But as it currently stands, it goes as far out, so you start with your beneficiary, it goes as far out as first cousin, and steps count. So I'm currently saving for my 3 nieces, and I actually also have an account for my husband because he's thinking about taking some classes. And so again, if you think you might want some education, start saving. And I'm not nervous that someone's not going to use all their money, because I can easily change the beneficiary on any of those dollars to anyone else that I'm already saving for, because they're all members of the same family.
Great. You actually covered my next question there too, on speaking about the different types of education that 529 plans can be used for. Yeah. Great. Marissa, can someone also create multiple 529 plans for the same beneficiary?
Absolutely. So what's beautiful about 529s, and it goes both ways. So a beneficiary can have multiple accounts from multiple account owners. So grandma can have an account, auntie can have an account, parents can have an account, but also I could have 3 or 4 for the same beneficiary. So Mark mentioned earlier, if you're saving for K-12, that might be something you want to do, is you want to have your one for K-12. Or you may just want to have different things for different reasons and whatever that might be, but an account owner can own multiple accounts. The beneficiary can be the beneficiary on multiple accounts. And the other thing that's fantastic about 529s, there's no income limit. So you can't make too much or too little to open an account. And a lot of folks will actually push back on me when I say, well, you can't make too little. Like, well, if you're not somebody who, if you have financial struggles, then maybe this isn't the product for you. And I'm not saying that you should have it if it's not something you want to do. But what's great is a lot of these plans have gifting platforms. So you can open the account and let friends and families, aunts and uncles contribute to those accounts for no cost, or there's some options that there are small costs, but you can have the village help send the child to school. So lots of ways to kind of give a gift that lasts, and it's not just on the parent. And I have this goal of X dollars, and it's all my responsibility. We can invite friends and family, especially my generation who, I just paid my student loans off in February, so it's very real to me. I want to make sure the girls have a little bit of a head start. And so you can start doing that, especially this time of year. What do the kids want for Christmas or Hanukkah? They would like money for education. Here's your gift code or your gift for college gift card, or however you want to handle that. That can then be put into those accounts to get these children, or yourself, if you're an adult who wants to go back, a head start for saving.
That's such a great point.
There's also a lot of research that shows that even a small amount saved in a 529 plan can have a really big impact on the likelihood of that child going to college and graduating from college, because it sets up an expectation that the child is going to go to college, and that influences the classes that they take, their academic performance, and sets a clear path for them. And it's incredible how much of an impact that has. That's why many of the states have these birthday present contributions to 529 plans, where you can get, if you open the state's 529 plan within a year of birth, you can get a contribution from the state to their 529 plan. And for low-income families, matching their contributions. So there are a lot of options, and you can make contributions to a 529 plan for as little as $25 per month. It's set up on an automatic investment. $15 in some states if you do it through payroll deduction.
All right. Someone asked, are there 529 plans that are only offered through an advisor and not available to open yourself, basically, to the public? And if so, where can we find this information when researching plans? You want to take that, Mark? Or Marissa? Yeah, go ahead. Why don't you
Well, no, I was going to say, sure. There's tons. They're called advisor sold plans. And for example, Indiana has one. So we have College Choice Direct, which you do yourself online, College Choice Advisor, you have to work through a financial professional, or College Choice CD, which is also a direct plan. And so just in your searching, you can start saving for college. You can Google the term and those will pop up. So, but this is what you want to be careful of. And all due respect to everyone involved in the industry is, again, so take a look at who you like, because maybe you already invest with someone and you love them. But keep in mind, if you are specifically interested in your state's tax incentive, and obviously this is a big old thing for Indiana because we do have the most generous in the country at 20% credit, that you have to be in your state's plan in most states to get that credit. So just double check your work. The plan that you're getting is the one that you think you're getting. I talk to folks all the time that their guy helped them sign up for this, but it's not what qualifies you in Indiana. So absolutely, there's lots of advisor sold products out there, and they're fantastic. Just make sure that you know that that's the plan that you actually mean to be in. And just make sure you double ask those questions, because it really is, a lot of those incentives are going to be based on making sure you're in that state's plan if one's offered.
Great point.
And you can get a lot of information about all the advisor sold plans as well as the direct sold plans on savingforcollege.com. We have details about every single one of these on our website, including what the fees are, what the state tax breaks are, the investment options. We also have a directory of financial advisors. So if you're looking for a financial advisor, you can search based on your location and other criteria to find one. you should, though, compare the trade-offs between the fees and commissions that you may pay with both an advisor sold plan and a direct sold plan. There are no commissions on direct sold plans, and generally the fees tend to be a little bit lower on the direct sold plans, but then you're doing it yourself. You're not benefiting from the advice of a financial advisor.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, and I'll just mention to everyone, you can go to savingforcollege.com and search for plans in your state. There's a map on the homepage, or you can find it in the menu. And when you look at your state or any state, you'll see all the plans offered and grouped by whether they're direct sold or advisor sold. So you can find all that info there.
And one thing in general, that having a lower fee matters more when the child's young, and having the tax break matters more when you're a few years away from college. And that's a good fit with the CD-based plans, where you're going to want to have the lower risk of loss and also have that state tax break at the same time. And the reason is that the fees, having lower fees, is annual, whereas the state tax breaks are just on that year's contributions. So when you amortize it over a longer time period, having lower fees matters more than having a state tax break. But right around when the child enters high school is an inflection point where the benefit shifts from lower fees to having the state tax break. And depending on the state, you may have the best of both worlds, low fees and a state tax break.
Mark, Sunil asked a question that is one we hear pretty commonly, which is basically about like, why shouldn't I just use a Roth IRA, right? Because that way, if my kid doesn't go to college or gets a scholarship or something, that's money I've saved toward retirement. So can you address that a little bit? Why a 529 plan versus a Roth IRA?
So if you're pretty certain that your child's going to college, a 529 plan is a better mix of tax and financial aid advantages. If there's serious doubt about whether your child's going to go to college, a Roth IRA can be a good option because it gives them a head start on retirement. But it's not as good an option if you want to use that money to pay for college costs. And the reason for that is that distributions from a Roth IRA are going to count as income, as part of total income on the FAFSA, and will reduce aid eligibility by half of the distribution amount, up to half of the distribution amount. It won't be reported as an asset because it's a qualified retirement plan, but the distributions wipe out any financial aid benefit from it. Whereas a 529 plan is reported as an asset at a low assessment rate, up to 5.64%, and the distributions are ignored. So that's a trade-off that you get. Now, there are strategies that you could use with a Roth IRA, like you could wait until after the January 1st of the sophomore year in college to take those tax-free return of contributions. Or you could wait until the child graduates if you're unsure whether they're going to graduate in 4 years. And you could then use that tax-free distribution to pay down their student loan debt. But other differences are the Roth IRA have annual contribution limits, and not just the $6,000 a year, $7,000 if you're age 50 or older. There's also, you have to have enough income to cover it. So you might end up giving them some money as in form of income so that you can contribute to the Roth IRA. But if the child's going to go to college, a 529 plan is the better bet. Okay. If you're pretty certain they're not going to go to college, then a Roth IRA gives you that added flexibility of saving for retirement.
So Marissa, that question kind of hints at the $1 million question, which we get all the time. And Chai asked it, what happens to the money accumulated in a 529 plan if the student decides not to go to college? And I'll also add to that, or gets a scholarship, right? Because that's the other thing people worry about. Can you address that?
Sure. So if that beneficiary doesn't go, you have a couple of options. One, you can leave the money in there. There's no time frame, right? So there's no horizon. If they say they don't go initially, but 2 or 3 years down the road, they realize they want to go back and get a credential. Because what I think we keep talking about, we use the term college, and we're college choice, it's saving for college. But again, anything outside of high school, The litmus test for using a 529 is that the institution has to accept federal financial aid. So if they're going to go anywhere that accepts federal financial aid, and there's even 400 international schools, right, in other countries that accept the 529. So anything that they're going to do that. So you can change beneficiary, you wait it out, see if they change their mind later. So give them some breathing room. Two, you can change a beneficiary on the account to another member of the family. Remember, we talked about that earlier. It's not just a sibling. So if this is an only child, don't panic. You can bless a cousin. You can use this account, make yourself, because you can be the owner and the beneficiary. Put it back on yourself. Get yourself some additional education, whatever you've been dreaming of doing. Or you can do what we don't love, but you can take what's called a non-qualified withdrawal. Now, the thing to remember is you put your dollars into this account after tax. So you've already paid the taxes on these dollars. So when you withdraw the money, you're going to be withdrawing those dollars. You're going to have a 10% penalty, and then state and federal income tax, but only on the earnings portion. So say today you put $1,000 in, and next week you panic and you're like, you know what, I don't feel comfortable, I don't understand it, I'm pulling it out, and it's worth $1,010. That 10% penalty and those state and federal income taxes are on the $10, because remember that 1,000 was already after tax. So, you know, you have those options to get those, they're not trapped. You can always get your money back. Yes, there are going to be some instances like that. The other thing to think about is if you did get special tax treatment at the state level, whether you have a credit or deduction, you may face recapture of what was claimed on those dollars to the state as well. But again, those were only incentives you received for saving for education. So it makes sense that those would be due back. The question about scholarships is also interesting. So if your child does get a scholarship, they get that full ride to, you know, in this case, it's Notre Dame, maybe it's Duke, maybe it's University of Maryland. You can take those dollars out, dollar for dollar, up to the scholarship amount. Now, that is not a qualified withdrawal. I've heard that lots of times. People say, oh, it's qualified. It's actually not. Now, you're not going to pay a penalty, because there's never a penalty because your kid got a scholarship. That is a day to celebrate. But what you are going to pay are state and federal income tax on the earnings portion only. So if they get that $50,000 full ride and you pull the $50,000 out, but say 40 of it was your original investment and the 10 is your earnings, it's again only going to be, those penalties are only on the earnings portion because you put your dollars in after tax.
Got it. And is that the same, Marissa, if they go to one of the military academies like West Point or something?
You know what, that's an excellent question. I'm actually going to pitch that to Mark, because we get lots of questions about that as well, about how do you look at the military academy and which ones qualify.
So if the child goes to one of the U.S. military academies, the distribution up to the is going to essentially be penalty free. You'll still pay the ordinary income taxes on the earnings portion of the distribution, but you'll avoid that 10% tax penalty. There is another option for leftover money in a 529 plan, not just if the child doesn't go to college, and maybe they went to college and they still had money left over, and besides using it for their graduate school or using it for yourself or for a cousin, another option is just leave the money in the 529 plan. So they don't go to college, but maybe their children will go to college. Well, they will then be able to use that 529 plan money to pay for their children's, your grandchildren's college education. And it'll just be accumulating earnings all along for a long period of time. So in effect, you're leaving a long-term legacy for your future descendants.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Just one kind of on the basics, Marissa, earlier you mentioned that you can open a plan pretty much in any state. There are a couple states that restrict to only their residents, but most plans are open. Also, this person's asking, can I use that money anywhere?
Absolutely. And I think that was a fear very early on. And so just remember, 529s have only been around 20 some odd years. And so the fact that we just now are having legacy accounts, we're talking about grandchildren. I think there was a lot for earlier, oh my goodness, if I have Indiana's plan, I have to go to school in Indiana. Not true. So I mentioned earlier, the litmus test is any school that takes federal financial aid. So if you're not sure, if you're thinking about all the places that your child could potentially go, even if it's we have the Barber School here accepts federal financial aid, so they can use 529 accounts there. Just go to the Department of Education website, pop in the school name, and you'll get, you can look by state. You can look, a great way, because what happens is when you fill out that FAFSA, you have to include a code for the school. And those codes help let you know that those schools take federal financial aid. So that's an easy way, is just go to the Department of Education, take a look at all the schools you have choices of. But no, it doesn't have to be in your state, public, private, any school that takes federal financial aid in the US or abroad.
Okay.
We also have on savingforcollege.com an eligible institutional search tool. So it uses the same database of Title IV institution codes to identify which colleges, and lets you search by state, by name of the college, even foreign countries, Canada, Mexico, Australia, United Kingdom. There are 400, a little bit more than 400 foreign institutions where you can use the 529 plan money to pay for the tuition fees and other expenses. The one thing that you can't use a 529 plan for with overseas education is the transportation costs. It's unfortunately not considered a qualified higher education expense. But for most other things, you can use the 529 plan to pay for study abroad, or either just a semester or a year abroad, or for your entire education program.
All right, thanks so much. I just saw we're out of time. It's 2 o'clock. So I want to thank the audience for being here. Mark, thank you for sharing your expertise and insight. Marissa, thanks for being here. And thank you to College Choice CD for sponsoring. And now I'd like to announce that Sally Hernandez is the winner of the giveaway. Yay. So Sally, you'll be hearing from the Indiana Education Savings Authority about getting that set up. So, all right, thanks for all the great questions. I know we couldn't get to a lot of them. They came in fast and furious at the end. But remember, go to forum.savingforcollege.com or check out information on our website. And Mark, I'll pass these on to you. Mark may address some of these questions in future articles as well.
Okay.
Thank you.